Dios y mi hija me han perdonado.
God and my daughter have forgiven me.
You committed the ultimate act of betrayal, leaving your baby terrified, alone, unprotected, to suffer what I heard was the most gruesome death imaginable.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing super well. Thank you all so much for being here. Sorry I missed the past two videos, but there has just been a lot of stuff that we're working on behind the scenes, which I'm really excited to share with you guys soon. So things have been a little bit hectic over here. We're basically just trying to play catch up with the videos, but also working on, some other things. So it's just been a lot, but thank you all so much for being so patient. Like I've said a million times before, you guys are literally the best familia ever, and I appreciate you guys so much. Now, today is a very hard video to go over, and it's just very infuriating. In the words of the judge who reviewed this case, Judge Brendan, he said that this case has stunned people all across the world because it defied one of the most basic human responsibilities, and because the ultimate act of betrayal was committed. I want to put a trigger warning because this case does involve severe child neglect, and these details are very hard to listen to. With that being said, today we're going to be talking about 31-year-old Kristel Candelario and how she left her 16-month-old baby, Jailyn, all alone inside a playpen for 10 days straight. Jailyn waited and waited day after day for her mother to come back home, to pick her up from her playpen, to hug her, to make her feel better, and to nourish her. But sadly, that day never came. I've never been so angry at a case. Like, it's actually insane. Oh my God, it just breaks my heart. Anything that involves children just breaks my heart. It makes me so angry. So I'm going to leave some resources linked down below that talk about mental health and also information about a child abuse hotline. That being said, let's jump right in and let's talk about what happened. Jailyn Candelario was born on January 26, 2022 to her parents, Kristel Andrea Candelario, and to her father, Henry Yair Garcia. Now, her mother, Kristel, was born on September 11th, 1991 in Guayaquil, Ecuador, and she had a bachelor's degree in education. Now, she did have another daughter before Jailyn, and her name is Amaya, and she had a completely different father than Jailyn. We'll just call this guy Mark. So Mark and Kristel were together, they had Amaya, and then Kristel decided to leave him in 2016, and she actually moved to the United States to raise Amaya without Mark. So she went from living in Ecuador to now living in Cleveland, Ohio with her grandmother, and then a few years later, her parents, Ketty and Cleaver, moved to Cleveland with them as well. So the five of them were all now living together in a 1-bath, 3-bedroom house, so things were pretty tight. Kristel's parents and her grandmother would really help her out by taking care of Amaya and, just being a support system for her. In 2019, Kristel got a job working at Hope Academy North Coast as an instructional aide, and then later on worked at Citizens Academy Glenville as a substitute teacher. So she was in very close and frequent contact with children. In 2020, Kristel met Jailyn's father, Henry, who lived in Ecuador, through Facebook, and the two of them just hit it off through Facebook. They began talking, dating, and this whole relationship was basically long distance because Henry lived in Ecuador and again Kristel lived in Ohio. So Henry was not able to travel to the US due to an issue with his visa. So Kristel was the one who eventually made the trip to Ecuador to finally meet this man in person. And from there, they took things a step further and they actually went on vacation together to the Dominican Republic. On this vacation, Kristel actually took her daughter Amaya with them. So it was just the three of them on this trip, enjoying the beach, eating good food, and just having a good time. Eventually, the trip ends, and when Kristel returns to Ohio, she realizes that she has actually become pregnant. She tells Henry that she's pregnant with his baby, and like I said, Henry is not able to come to the US because of his visa problem, so he was like, okay, I guess we'll make this work through the phone, and that's exactly what happened. They would constantly be talking and sharing photos and stuff like that over social media. They would do video chat, and sometimes Kristel would go back to Ecuador to visit him, but it wasn't very very often. Now, while things seemed to be going well at first, while Kristel was pregnant with Jailyn, her relationship with Henry actually turned very bad. They would end the relationship, then they would get back together, then they would break up again, get back together, and so on and so forth. So it just was not a healthy relationship at all. Despite how her relationship with Henry was, Kristel did seem really excited about her pregnancy, and she posted photos on social media of her ultrasounds, and again, from the outside, everything looked normal. Kristel stayed in Ohio to give birth to Jailyn, and Henry was actually able to witness the birth through video chat. And that was that. Baby Jailyn was born, and she had these big, gorgeous eyes, just the cutest little cheeks, and she was honestly just such a beautiful baby. Jailyn was described as being very wonderful, very curious, happy, and always smiling. According to Kristel's parents, Kristel would work a lot to make ends meet, which means that she couldn't devote all of her time to her 2 children, so her parents did help her, taking care of Amaya and taking care of Jailyn, as well as her grandmother, but they could only do so much. Shortly after Jailyn was born, neighbors began noticing that Kristel would leave Jailyn alone for periods of time with other people. So basically anyone that would say yes, Jailyn would be left with that person. Which I understand, like, mothers need help and fathers need help. It's a lot being a parent. So I understand asking for help, but neighbors just found it a little bit weird that Kristel would just leave Jailyn with basically anyone, even if she barely knew that person. According to a previous babysitter who would watch Jailyn named Carol, she said that Kristel's lack of care and affection for her own baby was notorious. Oftentimes, Carol would babysit Jailyn and ask Kristel, what time are you going to come back to pick up the baby? And Kristel would tell her, oh, I'll be there in 5 minutes. And then she would just keep saying that, but wouldn't arrive until hours later, sometimes even past midnight. One neighbor, who we will call Lola, said Kristel asked her to take care of Jailyn just for the weekend in August of 2022, but she actually ended up disappearing for a month and a half, you guys. That is insane. Lola said, quote, I was the one calling her saying, look, I need milk. I need money. I don't have money to buy milk for your baby. What am I supposed to do? End quote. I just can't imagine how stressful that must be. Like, it's one thing to agree to watch a baby for the weekend, but for a whole month and a half with no money, no milk for the baby, like, this is not your child. So it's just very, very frightening that Kristel felt comfortable enough just leaving for a month and a half without letting Lola know ahead of time, without giving her money or giving, what her baby needs to survive for a month and a half. It's just very frightening and very disappointing. It honestly got to the point where Jailyn was calling Lola Mama, which means mom. Lola's 13-year-old daughter, who we will call Lauren, actually grew quite close to Jailyn and would also take care of her as well. She described Jailyn as a sister who she loved very much and just being the cutest baby. Now, what's just absolutely disturbing is that Kristel went from leaving her baby with anyone who would do her the favor to leaving Jailyn all alone in her home. Completely alone. Not with a neighbor, not with a stranger, not with her grandma, not with her parents, not with a friend. Literally completely alone in a house with no one else inside. How can a mother just leave their baby all alone for days? Like, how heartless and selfish do you have to be to do something like that? A lot of people are just like, what did she think was going to happen? That Jailyn would be fine, that she would take care of herself, that she would change her own diaper, that she would feed herself. It's just so insane that she started doing that. And what's crazy is that neighbors did notice this. They were like, hello, like, the baby's just completely alone. What's going on here? And they actually spoke to Kristel about this, and they told her, like, listen, I can take care of the baby instead, but you cannot just leave Jailyn alone. But apparently Kristel just wouldn't listen. Her neighbor Lola said, quote, we kept telling her not to leave her alone. Not only me, my friend across the street too, but she always leaves her by herself. So it was known to the neighbors that Kristel was not a very present mother and that she was struggling to raise her 2 daughters on her own, despite the help from her parents and her grandmother. Although neighbors had their concerns and were not approving of the way Jailyn was being taken care of, social services and the police were never involved. And a lot of people have criticized that. They're wondering, why didn't the neighbors call the police if they saw that a infant baby was being left home alone? And I totally understand those questions, because I'm wondering that too. Like, how would you not involve the police or not tell Kristel Kristel's parents like, hey, your daughter is leaving her baby at home alone. Like, you need to talk to her or we're going to call the police. It's just very confusing. Maybe they did tell the parents and it just hasn't been released yet, or I don't know, but I just find it very shocking that no one called the police or social services. In January of 2023, things took a turn for the worse. Kristel's mental health was at an all-time low due to her financial struggles, as well as her recurrent problems that she was having with Henry. She actually attempted to take her own life by taking 20 ibuprofen. In February, Kristel's mom took her to the hospital because half of Kristel's body just went completely numb. Now, the doctors initially thought that she was just having a stroke, but after conducting a couple of tests, they learned that that was not the case and what she was actually suffering was anxiety. So they sent her home with 2 different antidepressants. However, even with these antidepressants, Kristel realized that things were just not getting better. She was still suffering from severe migraines and she still had feelings of half her body going numb, and she also still had a lot of anxiety, so she actually went back to the hospital in March, and once again the doctors ran a couple of tests, but they told her that she seemed completely fine, that this was just her anxiety, that anxiety and stress were triggering her body's reactions, and that nothing more severe was going on. So they sent her back home with some more antidepressants and with some medication to help her sleep. Again, after this, Kristel went back to her life as usual and she took her medicine every single day. It turns out, however, that when Kristel's medication ran out, she never went to go get a refill. She just abruptly stopped taking these medications, which apparently is a big no-no. Like, if you're gonna go off these type of heavy medications, you kind of need to be like tapered off, and this needs to be done with your doctor's supervision, but Kristel did not do that. Again, those medications are strong and the withdrawal effects are very serious, and she needed to be monitored, but she did not go back to the hospital, and apparently her doctors had no idea that she just stopped taking the medication. So, fast forward to June of 2023. Kristel was left alone at home with Jailyn because her parents went on vacation to Ecuador, and they actually took Jailyn's sister Amaya with them. So it was just Kristel and Jailyn at home. Now, Kristel was not happy about this. She was like, well, hold on, if everyone else gets to go on vacation and live their lives, then I want to go on vacation too. You know, Kristel at this point was very overwhelmed with work and taking care of her kids, and apparently she was just desperate for a break. Nothing was really going to stop Kristel from going on vacation, not even the fact that she was alone and in charge of her baby. So in order to go on this vacation, Kristel did something absolutely inhumane, something so incredibly selfish. On June 6, 2023, Kristel decided to leave her home so she could go on vacation, and she left her 16-month-old daughter behind. She left Jailyn inside her home, in a bedroom, inside a pack-and-play playpen, completely alone, with nothing but a blanket and a few bottles of milk. Yeah. Instead of calling the babysitter, calling her neighbor, calling anybody like she previously had, Kristel just packed her bags and booked her trip knowing that she was going to abandon her baby. Kristel left and she didn't come back home until the morning of June 16th, 2023. 10 days later. Jailyn was alone for 10 days. Can you just imagine leaving your baby completely alone with nothing but a few bottles of milk and a playpen for 10 days? Just leaving your baby absolutely helpless, scared, and alone. Well, actually, we can't even imagine because I feel like most people would never do that. That's actually insane. It really bothers me how in the mind of Kristel, she was probably thinking, you know, oh, I'll just arrive from my trip, I'll get back home, I'll walk inside, and my little baby Jailyn will just be there waiting for me to pick her up, and then we'll just go on about our life as usual. As if leaving your baby unattended for 10 days would have no consequences. At 7:36 a.m. on June 16th, Kristel arrived home, again thinking that everything was normal, that Jailyn would just be sitting there completely fine. However, she was very wrong. When she walked inside, she saw that her baby Jailyn was unresponsive. At 7:47 a.m., she calls 911 and frantically screams over the phone that her baby is unresponsive and to please help her because her baby is dying. She says that Jailyn is white and is crying and is just screaming to the 911 operator, and again, she just sounds absolutely hysteric. When police arrive, they see Jailyn in a horrific state. Jailyn was lying in her playpen, which was soiled with her own urine and with her own feces. Her eyes were sunken, her lips were cracked and dried, and she also had fecal matter in her mouth and under her fingernails. She was so severely dehydrated and malnourished that she actually weighed 7 pounds less than what she did at her last doctor appointment, which was just 2 months prior. It was also noted that Jailyn's clothes were not soiled. She was actually in clean clothing when police arrived, which indicated to them that when Kristel saw this, situation, she decided to quickly change Jailyn's clothes before the police arrived in an attempt to basically hide what had happened. But honestly, a clean change of clothes would not be able to mask this horrific discovery. So police see this. Of course, they're absolutely shocked and traumatized, and they sit down with Kristel to ask her, what happened here? Like, what happened to your baby? And that's when Kristel tells them that Jailyn was sick and that she was vomiting that week on Monday and Tuesday. So she gave her some Tylenol to help with the vomiting. She then said that on Wednesday and Thursday, Jailyn was refusing to eat and that she was crying a lot and screaming a lot and just wasn't feeling well. Then that Friday morning, Kristel said she initially thought Jailyn was just sleeping since she sleeps 12 hours each night. So she didn't think anything was wrong until she realized that Jailyn was unresponsive and that she looked really dry and just basically shriveled. At that point, she got really scared, and that's when she called 911.
But in the last week, she get vomiting too. Remember right now when you mentioned the vomiting. She get vomiting the last week, Monday and Tuesday, 2 times. But I was trying controlling because I know I give to her Tylenol or something, for controlling the vomiting.
Okay. Come on, sir.
Hi.
This is my supervisor, Sergeant Gomez.
Reality too. I give to her when she got a valley or vomiting. Hola, ¿qué tal?
Soy la secretaria de la Operación de
Well, just to take note, Your Honor, she's
So
sitting in the
yeah,
chair.
that's the situation, and after that, she was refusing to do the food, and she was with no appetite.
So this is a story that she's telling police, but of course, this is all a lie. Like, we know that she was not there on Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Like, she was literally on vacation. So she is just making up this lie to basically save herself. And I don't know how she thought police wouldn't discover that this was a lie. Now, something else that stood out to people in this police interview, because you can find it online, so I will try to link it down below. If I can't put it in here for copyright reasons, again, just check down below. So people noted that Kristel just appeared pretty calm in this interview, despite Jailyn's lifeless body lying right next to her covered by a blanket. I think most parents would probably be bawling their eyes out and unable to even articulate words, but Kristel looked pretty calm and collected. And I know that everyone responds to this type of situation differently, but it was just something that stood out to a lot of people. Now, police listened to Kristel's story and they're not really too convinced about it. They kind of feel like something isn't right here. Like, the way Jailyn was found, the way the playpen was, and the whole scene, they just knew that something was wrong. So they tell her to, grab her stuff, and they take her down to the Cleveland Police Homicide Unit to begin another interview. This interview was conducted by Detective TJ Powell and by Sergeant Teresa Gomez. At this point, police still didn't realize that Kristel had been gone for 10 days on vacation, but again, they just knew that something more was going on. Jailyn's death was just very suspicious, and Kristel's story was not making a lot of sense. Now, another strange thing is that Kristel was initially talking to police in English, and she was able to understand their questions and respond to them well, but in the second interview with the homicide unit, she appeared to not understand English. She was not able to speak English, she was not able to respond to these questions, and she actually required a translator. Again, this was something that stood out because people were like, you were just speaking English a few minutes ago and you were answering perfectly fine, and now you're saying that you can't speak English and that you need a translator? It just was really odd. In this interview with the homicide unit, Kristel actually confessed that she was in fact not home earlier that week like she initially told police. She told them that she was actually working as an Uber driver occasionally, and that on Monday, June 12th, she decided to leave her home at around 8 o'clock in the morning to go work as an Uber driver all the way in Detroit, Michigan, because she had a friend named David there, and she was like, you know what, I'm just gonna kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I'm gonna drive to Detroit, Michigan to visit my friend David, and at the same time, I'm also gonna going to work as an Uber driver to make some money. Now, the drive up to Michigan was about 2.5 hours, so police were just like, that doesn't really make sense. Sergeant Teresa Gomez asked her, why don't you just work Uber here in Cleveland, Ohio, where you live? Well, it's because I wanted to go visit my friend David up in Michigan. Which again, if your daughter was actually sick, why would you leave her alone in the first place to go visit your friend and to go Uber? Detective TJ Powell asked her, why didn't you take Jailyn with you to go Uber or to go visit your friend David if you knew that she was sick? And Kristel said that she just wanted to get out and travel and that she was planning on coming home Friday and then would spend some more time with her daughter then. Again, none of what she was saying was making any sense, and Sergeant Teresa Gomez told her that they were starting to look at camera footage, so she better tell them the truth or else they're gonna find out the truth sooner or later, which they did. As their investigation continued, police discovered that Kristel lied about everything, which again, we already know now, but in the moment, they genuinely did not think that this lady left for 10 days on vacation and just left her baby alone. After going through so much evidence, they now knew that Kristel left her home on June 6th and did not come home until June 16th. They learned that Kristel was traveling to Michigan and Puerto Rico, and she was actually posting photos online about her vacation, about her having fun and just like enjoying life, while her child was home alone, hungry, and thirsty. Police just couldn't believe it, and with all of this evidence, Kristel was arrested on June 19th, 2023 on counts of murder, felonious assault, endangering children, and aggravated murder, and she had a $1 million bond at the county jail. She underwent psychiatric tests to determine if she was competent to stand trial and to see if she was sane at the time all of this occurred, and these results concluded that yes, she was competent to stand trial and she was sane when she committed this terrible act. On February 22nd, 2024, Kristel pled guilty to 2 of the charges, which were aggravated murder and endangering children as part of a plea deal, and her sentencing date was set for Monday, March 18th. So there was no trial. She was just like, yes, I will accept these 2 out of the 4 charges. I'm assuming they didn't go to trial because the evidence was just so overwhelming, which we will get into right now, because I was watching the sentencing hearing, and I was listening to, I believe it was a prosecutor or like someone from the prosecution's team saying like, if we had gone to trial, like the evidence would have been so overwhelming, and she named a couple of the, key pieces that they found, but she was like, yeah, no, if we had gone to trial, like this would have been crazy because there's so much evidence showing, what she did wrong. So I'm assuming that's why she decided to just take the plea deal, just to kind of accept what she did, because there really was no way to lie about this. Kristel's defense attorney, Derek Smith, said that this was the first time Kristel was left alone to take care of Jailyn all by herself, and that it just took a really heavy toll on her mentally. As we know, Kristel was already battling with some mental health issues, and she was off her medications. Kristel did rely a lot on her parents to help her care for the children, as well as on her grandmother and her neighbors. She had a lot of people that would often take care of Jailyn, so the fact that she was left home alone this time with no one around her to help her, apparently it was just too much for her. That's what her lawyer is saying. He specifically said, quote, her family, they think they failed Jailyn and Kristel. They are devastated. They wish they would have been able to see some of the signs of her struggle. It could have helped save 2 lives. Depression can make you do things you normally wouldn't do, and unfortunately it caused a lot of problems for her, and now her daughter is not with us anymore. I just wish at the same time she would have had a better understanding of what was really going on and what the repercussions were, end quote. So there's a lot to discuss about Kristel's sentencing, so let's get into it. Her sentencing was on March 18th, 2024, so this was kind of recent. Assistant Prosecutor Anna Farglia presented a PowerPoint with all of the evidence against Kristel. She began by showing a Denny's restaurant receipt found inside Kristel's car, which places her all the way in Taylor, Michigan on June 4th, 2023 at 7:41 a.m. Then, by combing through over 648 hours of Ring doorbell footage, investigators discovered that Kristel returned to her home on June 6th at 7:41 a.m. So she gets home at that time, hours pass, and then Kristel is seen on camera leaving her home with a suitcase, placing it inside her car, and then driving off at 5:24 p.m. Thanks to a license plate camera reader, investigators saw Kristel driving in Lincoln Park, Michigan at 8:05 p.m. that same day. Then, according to her Spirit Airlines boarding passes, Kristel traveled from Detroit, Michigan to San Juan, Puerto Rico on June 8th and stayed there until June 11th with a man and with some friends. It's not confirmed who this man is and what type of relationship it is. I did see some reports say that it was like a boyfriend or just like a guy she was hooking up with, but other people believe it could be that same like David friend that she was going to go visit in Michigan, or again, just some other guy. We're not really sure. Regardless, while she was in Puerto Rico, she was very active on her social media, and she was posting photos of her on the vacation, and she was posting photos of her on the beach, of her drinking, of her eating, and clearly having a good time because she's smiling in all of these photos, and she took the time to post them on social media and write a caption for it. She also changed her profile photo that same day she arrived in Puerto Rico with the caption, quote, "Time enjoyed is the true time lived." Kristel's defense was trying to prove that she was not sane at the time that this happened, but based on all of this, it seems like she did have very clear mental capacity at the time all of this was happening. You know, she was able to make travel arrangements, buy her flights, pack her bag. She drove all the way to another state. She made it there safely. She was able to get through airport security and travel all the way to Puerto Rico. And on top of that, she was taking all of these photos and was able to pick which ones to post on social media and write the captions for them. So all of that combined together just seems like, yeah, she was clearly sane during all of this if she was able to do all of that. While Kristel was away on June 9th at 1:04 a.m., a neighbor's Ring doorbell actually recorded Jailyn's cries coming from inside the home. I'm not sure if the neighbor just didn't hear it because, I mean, this happened at 1 o'clock in the morning, so maybe the neighbor wasn't awake at that time and wasn't checking their doorbell footage, but oh my god, I heard the video and it just broke my heart, you guys. It's so... oh my god, it makes me so angry. I don't want to cry, but it's just Jailyn was in there crying for someone to help her, for someone to feed her, for someone to bathe her, for someone to hold her and just give her love. And she was just crying there while her mother was on vacation posting photos. Assistant prosecutor Anna said that animals take better care of their infants than how Kristel took care of Jailyn. So when Kristel's Puerto Rico trip ended, she returned to Detroit, Michigan, and then traveled to Imlay, Michigan to see another man, a different man than the one she went to Puerto Rico with. Kristel stayed there from June 12 to June 16, and then that's when she finally came back home at 7:36 a.m. She is seen on the doorbell footage arriving home, and that's when she finds Jailyn and calls 911. I know, it's a lot. There's a lot of timestamps and dates to think about, but all of this put together just really helped police and the prosecution put a timeline of what happened the day Kristel left and what happened the day she came back. Now, with this receipt from Denny's and the doorbell footage, the receipt from Denny's and the surveillance footage from the neighbor's Ring doorbell, it seems like Kristel actually left Jailyn alone as well from June 4th when she went to Denny's to June 6th when she is seen returning on camera, which is just absolutely evil. I mean, leaving your daughter alone for 2 days is terrible. So in total, it seems like she left Jailyn alone for 12 days, basically. The medical examiner, Elizabeth Mooney, said that Jailyn's cause of death was, quote, starvation and severe dehydration due to pediatric neglect, end quote. As I mentioned before, Jailyn was found lying in her playpen, which was soiled with her own feces and with her urine. Her eyes were sunken, her lips were cracked and dried, and she also had fecal matter in her mouth and underneath her fingernails, which indicated that she attempted to survive by trying to eat her own fecal matter. She was so severely dehydrated and malnourished that she weighed 7 pounds less than what she did at her last doctor appointment 2 months prior. I know I already said that before, but I just want to emphasize how intense and how severe this was. She also had temporal wasting, which is an indicator of severe nutritional deficiency, and she also had decreased turgor, which is when the skin is very pinched and remains elevated in that pinched position, and that indicates severe dehydration. She believed Jailyn died sometime between June 9th and June 13th. Jailyn could have been saved and she would still be here today if Kristel called someone to get her baby, or if she just didn't leave her baby alone in the first place. Now, Elizabeth was fighting back tears when she was testifying in court, and she went on to say, quote, the pain and suffering she endured lasted not only hours, not days, but possibly even a week. This feeling of abandonment for days on end, coupled with the pain of starvation and extreme thirst, is a type of suffering I don't think any of us could ever fully fathom, end quote. She also said that as a forensic pathologist, she is the voice of the dead and is given the responsibility to speak for those who can't and is honored to have done so for Jailyn. Sergeant Teresa Gomez, who initially interviewed Kristel with Detective TJ Powell, also gave a statement during the hearing, and she was also fighting back tears. She said, quote, "This baby loved her mother. She needed her mother. Her mother betrayed her. Mothers usually want their children to have a long, happy life, but Candelario placed more importance on a vacation in Puerto Rico with her boyfriend than the health, safety, and the well-being of her own daughter. She chose to satisfy her own needs and desires over that of her own child. Jailyn's life ended because of her selfishness for Jailyn's precious life. Candelario violated Jailyn yet again when she placed her little body in a clean outfit in order to orchestrate this facade that she was trying to portray for the investigators either before or after she called 911, end quote. When I was reading that statement, I got so emotional, and it hurts me so much to think of what Jailyn suffered in her final moment. And the fact that Kristel took the time to get her out of her dirty clothes and try to hide, what had actually happened makes me even more mad. Like, oh my God, this whole thing is just too much. Detective TJ Powell told the judge that in his 17 years working, Jailyn's case was by far the most horrific. He actually went on to share a poem about Jailyn, which read, "J is for the justice that will be received today. A is for the angel wings she earned on that dreadful day. I is for the incremental repetition buildup of suspense for a death that clearly makes no sense. L is for the lack of love while alone for 11 days. Y is for a young life that was taken away. N is for a new eternal life Jailyn gained on that day. No child should ever have to die this way." It's honestly a really beautiful poem. Prosecutor Michael O'Malley said, quote, "Today we remember Jailyn, a beautiful baby girl who was taken from this world due to her mother's unimaginable selfishness. The thought of going on vacation for 10 days and leaving your baby to starve to death in her pack and play is a new low in parental care," end quote. The assistant prosecutor Anna also went on to say how Kristel really has shown no remorse for the death of her baby, which was actually evident through a phone call that was recorded while she was in prison. This phone call, or I believe multiple phone calls, were between her friends and her family, and one of them happened on November 26, 2023, where Kristel called a friend and they were basically just talking about her trip to Puerto Rico, about how much fun it was, and how delicious all the food they ate was. How they were in between renting a car versus a truck, and so on and so forth, but nothing about Jailyn was ever said. Like, it's insane. Like, she's talking about how fun this trip was instead of saying, "Oh my gosh, I regret going on this trip, like my baby died, like I made a mistake." Like, at least show something, but no, she was literally talking about how much fun she had. She was also saying that she just could not wait to get home. So to everyone, it just seems like she really is showing no remorse for what she did to her own daughter. Now, let's move over to what the defense was saying during the sentencing. Her defense attorney, Derek Smith, appeared extremely uncomfortable while speaking to the judge and basically said that, yes, there is absolutely no excuse, no justification for what Kristel did, and that what she did is very narcissistic, selfish, and just the absolute worst parenting imaginable. Derek said that he commends the prosecution and detectives for their work because what happened is just horrific. He told the judge that everything he was about to say is mitigation, and it's just to basically provide a glimpse into who Kristel is since she already pled guilty. So it's not like he was out there trying to tell them like, "No, my client is innocent, like she didn't do this." Like, no, he was like, "No, I know, what she did was absolutely terrible. It's like the worst thing you could ever do. She already pled guilty, but let me just explain to you like how we got to this point." He went on to explain the events that occurred before Kristel went on her vacation, which I already mentioned earlier, of how she was struggling with her mental health and everything about her medications, etc. And said that although in the photos of Kristel on vacation she appears happy, photos can lie and they can deceive, and what Kristel was suffering was not on the outside but on the inside, and no one knew what she was going through simply based on a photo. He said, yes, she could have called someone and saved Jailyn, but Kristel was basically in a state of psychosis from her just abruptly stopping her medication which greatly impacted her judgment. He said Kristel did not mean to do this, and although it is her fault, she took responsibility and called 911 as soon as she found out Jailyn was dead, and she also pled guilty. Now, Derek went on to call Kristel's parents for them to give their statements. Neither of them knew Kristel even went on vacation during this time because, again, they were actually in Ecuador with Amaya, so they had no idea that any of this was going on. Kristel's mom, Ketty, said that Kristel grew up in a home where there were good values, beliefs, emotions, warmth, and where the most important thing was family. A home where there was a healthy environment and where Kristel was loved so much. She went on to say, quote, "I don't want to justify or victimize anyone. I only want to give a glimpse of the interior person, the ego of someone who is seated here and is being judged. Ladies and gentlemen, mental health illness is not reflected in someone's face and also not in a picture. It arises and remains in the soul. Only a timely and effective treatment by therapists and doctors can help to improve these conditions. My daughter did not have a good quality of life because she couldn't stop working. No one ever imagined that this suffering would culminate into a tragedy," end quote. I will see if I can include her full statement here because there is video of it, but I'm not sure if it's going to get copyrighted, so if not, I will have it linked down below.
Estoy aquí para decirle al mundo
I am here to tell the world
que mi hija salió de un hogar
that my daughter came from a home
donde se creó una relación de humanismo,
where there was relations of humanism,
valores,
values,
creencias,
beliefs,
afectos,
emotions,
calidez,
warmth,
donde lo más importante era la familia.
where the most important thing was the family.
Y hoy aquí quiero decirle a Jailyn
And here I'm
que eres
here,
nuestro ángel, Jailyn.
I want to say here before Jailyn, our angel,
Tu recuerdo vive en nosotros.
that your memory lives within us.
Siempre te amaremos.
We will always love you.
Te acuné en mis brazos.
I held you in my arms.
Tus abuelos nunca te olvidarán.
Your grandparents will never forget you.
Perdóname, bebé,
Forgive me
por vivir la oscuridad del conocimiento
for being in the dark
que me imposibilitó ver la luz y poder ayudar a
and
tu
for being
madre.
in the darkness that prevented me from seeing the light to see what was going on with your mother.
Hija querida, cuánto te amo.
My beloved daughter, I love you so much.
Lamento y me arrepiento
I lament and I am
por no
so sorry
haber detectado lo que estabas viviendo.
for not having detected what you were going through.
No leí tu corazón.
I could not see what was in your heart.
No me percaté del caos
I didn't notice the chaos
por el que estabas atravesando.
that you were going through.
Lamento ahora, hija de mi vida, causarte este dolor.
I lament my darling daughter that I caused you this pain.
She went on to also ask the judge for mercy in her daughter and apologized directly to Kristel and said that she is sorry for not realizing what she was going through and told her that they will always be there for her and will wait the rest of her life for her. Kristel's father, Cleaver, also spoke out and asked the judge to have empathy for Kristel and said, quote, "Depression and anxiety consumed her to the point of depriving her of good judgment and reason. Here's my daughter, Kristel, who also has a motive to go forward with your help," end quote. Now, her motive being her older daughter, Amaya. Listen, a lot of people were upset with the parents' statements. I was reading the comments under the YouTube video and people were really upset about it, and I totally understand like that perspective, but I also understand the perspective of like, this is their daughter, like this is their child. So I just feel like most people like think that this would never happen to their children, that their children would never be capable of doing something like this. So I also understand that maybe they're still in shock about this and maybe they're putting the blame on themselves, you know, because they did apologize to Kristel and they were like, "We are so sorry we didn't get you help and we didn't recognize, you know, what was going on sooner." So I don't know, I feel bad for the grandparents as well because, I mean, they lost their granddaughter and they also are now losing their daughter who's going to jail forever. And and they have to raise Amaya now, most likely, or unless she goes back with her dad. I'm not sure, but I did feel sorry for the grandparents, but I also don't think that they should be making excuses for Kristel because what she did is absolutely evil. And I don't know, I feel like it's hard to feel sorry for someone who did this to a baby. You know, it's hard to feel empathy for Kristel and to feel sorry for her and want her to get a lighter sentence because what she did was just so evil. Now, after her parents spoke, Kristel finally spoke. She told the judge that she is very hurt about everything and is not trying to justify her actions, but that no one truly knew what she was suffering mentally every day. She said, quote, "Every day I ask forgiveness from God and from my daughter Jailyn. I'm a person who believes in God, and I recognize today that all of us are sometimes subject to the enemy. God and my daughter have forgiven me. I know that nothing can bring Jailyn back, and not a day goes by where I don't think of her. I pray to God that one day I will see her again." End quote. She was also holding back tears while she was doing this statement, and I don't know, I think the fact that she said that God and Jailyn have forgiven her is a really gross thing to say. Like, how do you know Jailyn forgave you? Like, why would she forgive you for ending her life and treating her like that and abusing her and abandoning her? Like, I don't see that reasoning. Maybe she's just saying that to make herself feel better, but God, that statement just, it was a lot.
Sorry. Hay mucho dolor que tengo con respecto a la pérdida de mi bebé Jackie.
There's so much pain that I have in regards to the loss of my baby, Jailyn.
Estoy muy dolida por todo lo que pasó.
I'm extremely hurt about everything that happened.
No estoy tratando de justificar mis actos,
I am not trying to justify my actions,
pero nadie sabe cuánto yo estaba sufriendo
but nobody knew how much I was suffering
y por lo que estaba pasando.
and what I was going through.
Todos los días le pido perdón a Dios y a mi hija, Jailyn.
Every day I ask forgiveness from God and from my daughter, Jailyn.
Soy una persona creyente de Dios
I'm a person who believes in God.
y reconozco hoy que todos y todas, muchas ocasiones, somos tentados por el enemigo.
And I recognize today that of me, all of us are sometimes subject to the enemy.
Dios y mi hija me han perdonado.
God and my daughter have forgiven me.
In the end, Judge Brendan sentenced Kristel to life in prison without the possibility of parole and told her very sternly, quote, "The bond between a mother and a child is one of the most purest and most sacred bonds between human beings. It's a relationship built on love, trust, and unwavering protection. Yet, in a shocking betrayal of this fundamental trust, you committed the ultimate act of betrayal, leaving your baby terrified, alone, unprotected to suffer what I heard was the most gruesome death imaginable, with no food, no water, no protection, and lying in her own feces. Miss Candelario, you know the responsibility of parenthood. You already have a child. You raised another child. I've witnessed here before me your parents who've showed you love and respect and education. They came here to help you, to advocate for you, more than what you've done for your own child. The evidence that I've witnessed here before this court shows that this time you simply chose not to be here because you wanted to have fun. You decided you needed a vacation. What followed was absolute depravity. You left your baby, Jailyn, trapped in a pack and play without food and water for 10 days. This wasn't simply an oversight. You could have saved Jailyn's life many times. You could have found someone to watch her while you were gone. You could have taken her with you while you were in Detroit or Puerto Rico. You could have called someone in Cleveland and told them that Jailyn needed help. Despite all of the suffering, that little baby persevered, waiting for someone to save her. And understand you could have done that with a simple phone call. Instead, I see photos of you on a beach while your child was eating her own feces in an attempt to survive. Photos mean something, and I'm well aware of mental health, but it didn't look like you were too concerned about your child. Just as you didn't let Jailyn out of her confinement until she died, so should you spend the rest of your life in a cell without freedom. The only difference is that prison will at least feed you and give you liquids that you denied her." End quote. I know that was a long statement, but what he said is just very impactful, and it's just very true. Like, she's at least going to be in prison, and she's going to get food, and she's going to get sunlight, and she's going to do stuff, but she literally left her baby there alone with a few bottles of milk. Like, first of all, how did she think that her baby was going to grab the bottles of milk and drink it? And second of all, how was she going to change her diaper and clean herself? And I don't even know if she left a light on, if she left the light off, if she had a window open or some type of noise for her. Like, it's just too much to think about what Jailyn went through in those final moments. And it's hard, like I said, to feel empathy for Kristel and to want to help her and give her a better sentence when what she did was so evil. As of now, Kristel is in prison and she actually has appealed the judge's sentence and she wants her mental health taken into account. So we will see what happens with that. 2 days after Kristel's sentencing, she did an interview via phone with Telemundo from prison. She said that she didn't plan the trip and that she just left on an impulse. She said, quote, "It was simply an impulse I had. I grabbed my 4 things and ran out of the house like when someone is chasing you." End quote. And she says that that is the reason why she left her 16-month-old baby alone in a playpen, and that it's very difficult for the rest of the world to understand that. And that this was all due to the mental health issues that she was suffering. And again, she never really took full responsibility in this interview. She said that she didn't want to continue living and simply wanted to get away from all the stress, depression, and anxiety she was feeling. She said that when she saw her daughter lifeless in the playpen when she got home, her entire world just fell apart. She said, quote, "I felt she could be saved. Things didn't have to happen that way because my daughter was doing well. I always took care of her." She also said that during her trip, she was thinking about Jailyn, and she even said that the people on the trip noticed that something was off about her and that they would ask her, "What's going on? You're not acting like yourself." And she says the reason why is because she was thinking about her daughter. She said that the only person that even asked about her daughter was her then boyfriend, which again, we don't really know who he is, but he asked how Jailyn was, and Kristel said that she kind of like snapped out of it and realized that Jailyn was home alone, pretty much abandoned. And she said that for a few seconds, she thought about maybe calling a family member or a neighbor to go check in on Jailyn, but she never made that call. She never told anyone that Jailyn was abandoned. As for Jailyn's father, Henry, he said that he found out about his daughter's death through the news. In an interview with Telemundo, Henry said, quote, "She was my blood, her blood. She is my daughter and she left in a disastrous way." End quote. He says he can't eat and he can only cry anytime he thinks about how this happened and why this happened. He said that Kristel's parents are in Ecuador now with Amaya and that they have full custody of her now. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, Henry is unable to travel to the US, so he's actually asking for help right now to get a humanitarian visa so he can go get his baby and give her a proper burial so she can rest in peace. My light is about to die, you guys. I am so sorry if the lighting just completely changed. It's literally about to die, and for some reason the other batteries aren't charging, so I'm so sorry about the light change. Going back to Henry, he has actually been a bit criticized by the public for his abusive behavior during his relationship with Kristel, and people have also criticized him for his absence in Jailyn's life. But I wasn't really able to find more information about Henry, if he did at least try to work on getting a visa to go be with Jailyn, if he did want maybe Jailyn and Kristel to move to Ecuador so he could help raise her. I don't really know the situation with that. Now, as for Kristel's parents, like Henry said, they are now living in Ecuador, and Ketty has done some interviews where she is still defending her daughter, which of course a lot of people do not agree with. In an interview with Univision, she said that she wants people to be more empathetic with her daughter because Kristel didn't plan to kill her daughter, nor plan to just get up and abandon Jailyn, and says that people need to understand that Kristel was battling a very strong mental disorder. This, of course, again, has made people quite angry because she just doesn't seem to understand the severity of what her daughter did and is asking asking the public to be empathetic to her daughter who left her baby alone for 10 days. People are really mad about this and they wonder, if she knew that her daughter was having mental health issues, why did she just leave her alone with Jailyn? How come they didn't take Jailyn with them to Ecuador as well? How come they didn't get her help? There's just a lot of questions that people have, and there's just a lot of things that could have been done to prevent Jailyn's death, but unfortunately nothing was done. Like the judge said at Kristel's sentencing, she committed the ultimate act of betrayal, and I just can't imagine how she was at the airport going through security. Maybe she even got a coffee before her flight and took a nap on the plane, checked into her hotel in Puerto Rico, asked her friends to take pictures of her, went out to get drinks and was dancing and stuff like that, and didn't even have a second thought about her baby who she knew was all alone and afraid. Alone, hungry, thirsty, confused, in pain. I mean, it's truly inhumane. While Jailyn was in agony inside her playpen, the world kept moving without knowing what was happening inside that house. She held on for as long as she could, and Jailyn's very unfortunate and tragic death will stick with me forever, and I'm sure with a lot of people, because what happened to her is just unimaginable, and I just truly pray that she is resting peacefully. Cases about child abuse are so hard to do. It just makes me so angry thinking about how this happened. So as I mentioned at the start, I will leave a couple of resources down below for mental health and for child abuse awareness. A lot of people feel that the neighbors and, Kristel's friends should have reported her to the police since she would leave Jailyn alone. Again, I'm not trying to put the blame on them, but it is upsetting that they didn't contact police or at least social services. So anyways, I'm going to link the Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline down below where they can explain how to identify abuse, how to identify neglect. There's also an option to contact a counselor if you need to ask them questions or just need to talk to someone. Honestly, they have a lot of amazing resources, and it's really important for us to know these things. So again, all of that will be linked down below. I would definitely love to know your thoughts on this case, and if there's ever anything else that you would like me to talk about on this channel and bring awareness to, please let me know by leaving me a comment down below. I'm so sorry again that the lighting looks insane. I don't know what happened to my batteries and why they're not working, so I apologize for the lighting issue, but I really appreciate you all being here and taking the time to listen to Jailyn's story. I appreciate you guys so much, and I will see you all in the next video.